How can you sit under my roof and say that my husband is no more? Is this some cruel game? Nalia's voice trembled as she stared at her mother, disbelief and dread tightening her chest. Welcome to Ibanji Echoes, where the drums of African tales beat deep and true. Nalia and Tunde had shared 3 years in marriage. Theirs was not a love of fireworks. It was like a steady drumbeat, quiet, constant, and full of prayer. They met during youth service in Ogude State, where they became close through their joint duties in church. Even after Tunde was transferred, their bond held fast. 2 years later, in a simple yet vibrant ceremony back in Loroka, they became husband and wife. That first year was golden. They had love, jobs, and dreams of building a life together from the soil up. A year later, their daughter, little Kamari, arrived. She came with wails loud enough to wake ancestors and eyes wide like the night sky. She brought light into their modest home, filling it with baby giggles, lullabies, and the sweet chaos of new parenthood. Nalia worked as a supervisor in a large bank nestled in the heart of Loroka. Tunde, a contract engineer, built roads and schools with a local construction group. Their life was humble but full. Some days were hard, but they had each other. They planned to save, buy land, and maybe welcome another child once Kamari started school. Then came the shift. One Tuesday, in the heat of Makimba Moon, February, Tunde opened an email that made his hands shake. A giant oil firm in Kibera City had offered him a permanent role. The pay was generous. There was a house, medical cover for all 3, and more than they'd ever imagined. That night, as Kamari dozed off between them on the old sofa, Tunde handed Nalia his phone. She read the letter, her forehead wrinkling with each line. "Kibera?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "It's everything we've fasted for, Nalia. Just the pay alone. But our lives are here. My work, our people. Kamari's roots. This is Loroka, Tunde." "I know," he said, his tone soft as silk. "But imagine what this could mean for her future. We could finally begin our homestead. No loans, no begging. We could enroll her in that good creche we liked. Better everything." Nalia looked at their sleeping daughter, then at the man she loved. "When would you start?" "Next moon cycle." That night they lay back to back, unspeaking. It wasn't pride she lacked. She was proud of him. It was the weight of change pressing down like a storm cloud. A week passed and they decided he would take the job. For now they'd live apart. Tunde would travel to Kibera and return at the end of each month. Later, they'd decide if Nalia would seek a job transfer or give up her role entirely. In the beginning, the plan held. Tunde left Loroka during the first Harmattan winds of March. He settled into the company's apartment. White walls, clean tiles, a small garden in the back. He sent Nalia pictures. The neatly made bed, the stocked kitchen, the gated compound. Each evening he'd video call. Kamari would munch her yam balls while he watched, asking about her day. As she dozed off, he'd whisper, "I love you both," like a lullaby floating through the screen. Nalia, meanwhile, adjusted to life as a solo parent. It wasn't easy juggling her job, Kamari, and a house that seemed to never stay clean. But she managed. Her mother visited sometimes, and her women's group at church checked on her often. Then came the last weekend of April. Nalia was so excited she took Friday off. She made Ofeoziza his favorite. She cleaned the whole flat, changed the sheets, and bought Kamari new pajamas, yellow ones with little drums on them. When Tunde stepped through the door that evening, Nalia wrapped her arms around him, tight and trembling. Kamari squealed, "Papa!" and latched onto his leg like a baby monkey. That weekend was full of warm bowls of soup, shared blankets, and late-night talks. "Maybe by new moon," Nalia said on Sunday. "I'll ask about a transfer. I think we could make Kibera work." Tunde smiled, hope glowing in his eyes. "That would be beautiful." Then the goodbye came. Kamari cried. Nalia didn't. Tunde hugged them, promised to call once he arrived, and by sunset he was gone again. So continued their new rhythm. Daily calls, funny messages, and counting down to each reunion. 8 moons passed this way. Tunde returned at month's end, arms full of toys, cloth, and treats. The job was changing their lives, for the better. Then came the knock. It was a soft sound, 2 taps. Silence. Nalia was folding Kamari's tiny wrapper when she heard it. Her brow furrowed. It was a Monday night. No one ever visited them then, and Tunde wasn't due till the month's end. She placed the wrapper on the couch and walked to the door. "Who's there?" she called. No response. Her heart quickened. She waited, then, slowly, turned the knob, and there he stood. Tunde. But not the man she knew. His shirt was covered in dust. A tear snaked across one shoulder. His trousers were scraped and stained. His face glistened with sweat and something darker, dried mud. There was a gash above his eyebrow. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and made it out breathing. "Tunde," Nalia's voice cracked. Before she could say another word, he stepped forward and pulled her into a fierce embrace, too tight, like he feared she might slip. "Away!" His chest rose and fell against hers like waves in a storm. He smelled of soil, salt, and something sharper, like metal and panic. "I missed you," he whispered, voice breaking. "By the ancestors, I missed you both." Nalia stepped back, just enough to search his face. "What happened? Where's your phone? Your car?" He took a shaky breath. "We had a company summit in Ngwolo. It ended early. I thought I'd surprise." "You spend 2 days home before heading back to Kibera. I didn't drive. We used the company's vans." Nalia listened, eyes widening as Tunde recounted how he'd tried to take a shortcut home from Ngwolo, thinking it would be easy to get to Laroka by public transport, something he never did. But desperation to see his family had made him reckless, and then they'd been robbed. The bus ambushed, phones and wallets snatched, passengers fleeing into the forest. He'd run for his life, thinking only of Nalia and Kamari, arriving battered and breathless at their door, which explained his appearance. She pulled him close, whispering thanks to the spirits for his safety, but the relief was short-lived. When little Kamari, upon seeing her father, backed away in fear, clinging to the wall and trembling. No coaxing helped, and when Tunde stepped forward she screamed, a loud, terrified wail, and bolted into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, leaving both parents frozen in place, confused and shaken, and though Tunde tried to brush it off as her being tired or scared by his disheveled look, Nalia couldn't shake the chill in her chest, the way something deep in her gut whispered that something was wrong, especially in the way Tunde hugged her, too tightly, and the strange hollowness in his eyes. That night, after Kamari cried herself to sleep, they sat with tea in dim light talking about mundane things like Nalia's difficult new manager, the odd woman outside selling maize, and Kamari's antics with the TV remote. And though they laughed, there were long silences when Tunde would drift into thought, smile fading, eyes distant, and when Nalia touched his hand, asking softly if he was okay, he only said he was tired, though she sensed there was more. When she stood and asked if they should go to bed, hoping to reconnect like old times, he shook his head and instead opened his duffel bag, pulling out a laptop and documents, bank papers, land deeds, insurance files, saying he'd been meaning to show her everything, and now felt like the right time, explaining that she needed to know in case anything happened. Nalia, moved by the thoughtfulness, gently asked why he was doing this now, to which he replied, "You're my wife. You should know everything." And though she nodded, touched, she still couldn't ignore how distant he felt, how he didn't kiss her goodnight or even hold her, simply lay on his back, arms crossed, staring at the ceiling, while she curled beside him with her hand resting. In his, feeling a peace that was more ritual than real, and as sleep finally came, her heart fluttered again with that same quiet unease, which lingered even as dawn crept in, and Kamari stirred babbling in her crib, while Nalia turned toward Tunde and saw him still lying there, still as stone. Holding his hand in the soft morning light, Nalia stared at the man she had always trusted, the man who once made the world feel safe. Despite the strange unease his presence stirred deep in her spirit, she longed for a normal day, so she called her boss and said she wouldn't be coming in, just needed time for her family. And as the house settled into a slow rhythm, the scent of fried yam and eggs drifted through the air, waking Tunde gently. They all ate together, Kamari calmer but still wary, letting Tunde touch her hair but pulling away whenever he tried to hold her, her eyes locked on him like she was studying. a stranger wearing her father's skin, and though he laughed nervously saying kids were unpredictable, Nalia couldn't shake the way Kamari stared. They cooked jollof rice next, joking about old memories, NYSC days, nosy neighbors and onion-cutting skills, laughter softening the space between them, until Nalia's mother called, checking in with concern, then her sister-in-law did the same, both expressing unease without clear reason, making Nalia glance at Tunde with confusion as he brushed it off as coincidence. But the flutter in her chest returned, just in time for a knock at the door around 4 p.m. Thinking it was the food vendor, she stood, but Tunde suddenly stiffened and said he'd be in the toilet, though he'd just come out, slipping into the bedroom too fast, and Nalia, puzzled, opened the door to find her mother and sister-in-law, standing pale and disoriented, looking like they'd walked from a funeral. And as they entered, Nalia, heart racing, asked what was wrong, why they'd come, only for her mother to take her hand gently and tell her to sit, her voice slow and careful, like someone holding bad news wrapped in thorns. When Nalia refused, her sister-in-law scooped Kamari into her arms protectively, and then the words came. There had been a terrible car accident the evening before. Tunde had been on a company bus, and he died on the spot. Nalia stared, blinked, then let out a sharp, almost hysterical laugh, calling it a twisted joke, insisting Tunde was in the house, had come back just the day before, had eaten with them, shown her documents, slept beside her. "Come and see," she cried, dragging them toward the bedroom, determined to prove the absurdity wrong. But when she pushed the door open, the room was empty, the bed slightly rumpled but cold, his duffel bag gone, the brown envelope with all the documents nowhere to be found. She called out his name, ran to the wardrobe, the bathroom, turned in slow circles, voice cracking as her mother and sister-in-law stared in horror, and then, from Chidima's arms, Kamari pointed a small, trembling finger at the bed and whispered, "Daddy, sleep there." And Nalia dropped to her knees, her vision swimming in tears, repeating one broken phrase again and again. He was here. He was just here. She stared at the empty space on the bed, trembling as her mother knelt beside her, arms wrapped around her like bark to a broken tree, whispering what Nalia couldn't yet accept. He came to say goodbye, and though her mother prayed, Chisholm tried to soothe her, and Kamari hummed softly nearby. The world had collapsed into silence for Nalia. She sat on the cold tile floor, clutching herself, rocking gently, trying to rewind time with her body back to last night when Tunde had returned, dusty and worn but alive, when his arms wrapped around her like roots clinging to soil, when his eyes held goodbye though she didn't yet see it. Her heart throbbed in a deep, empty rhythm, and as the truth cracked open inside her, she wept, not just in grief, but in guilt for brushing aside Kamari's terror, for missing the sorrow, in Tunde's tired smile, for ignoring how he didn't touch her in the night, how he handed her his entire life like a farewell gift. He hadn't come home. He had come to leave, and her sobs grew fierce and wild until her mother pulled her in and whispered, "Let it out, my daughter." And so she cried, for the man who kept his word to return, even in death, for Kamari who would grow up asking questions no one could ever truly answer, and for herself, a widow standing at the edge of a future she hadn't prepared for. And when her tears ran dry, her voice barely a whisper, she said, "He didn't come to stay, he came to leave." And the days after blurred into quiet shadows, as Tunde's body was returned to Luroka, his company handling all the arrangements, apologizing and honoring him as one of their best. The burial was set for Saturday, and family came from far and wide, the house filled with prayers, weeping, and the scent of candle smoke, and Nalia, dressed in white lace, stood like stone beside the casket, Kamari pressed to her chest too, small to understand but old enough to feel absence, eyes darting around as if waiting for her father to return and sweep her into his arms. When the coffin was lowered, Nalia knelt and whispered to the grave, "You kept your word, Tunde, as even in death you didn't leave us in the dark." And afterward, the weight of life returned. Documents to verify, visits to the bank, and the ache of confirming that everything he had shown her was real, from the savings to the land titles to the education fund in Kamari's name. She blinked back tears in front of the bank officer, overwhelmed not by loss, but by the love Tunde, had left behind in paper and planning. Slowly, she began stitching her life back together, hiring a part-time nanny to return to work, keeping his memory alive in stories and pictures, in the scent of his untouched shirts, and in every bedtime tale that began with "Your daddy once." Time passed, but she never forgot. The knock, the hug, the night beside him, the whisper of peace in his eyes. And she knew then, truly, that Tunde had not returned as a ghost, but as a husband who loved her enough to come back just once more, to say goodbye with his whole heart, and leave behind not just grief but grace. Even in death he had chosen love, and in goodbye he had given her peace. We have come to the end of this story,